one of them. And the results were pretty striking. It showed that um, Latter-day Saint LGBT youth were just about half as likely, just over half as
Wow.
likely as non-Latter-day Saint LGBT youth to to experience suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So that includes thoughts, plans, and attempts of suicide. And this was
So,
highly statistically significant. It's a big sample, um, and it actually persists when in the other study. Persists when controlling for demographic variables as well.
okay. And so basically in layman's terms, what this is saying is that if someone is LGBT and they also happen to identify as a Latter-day Saint, they're half as likely to report any sort of suicidal thoughts or behavior. Is that a fair summation of what the study found?
Compared to non-Latter-day Saint LGBT youth, yeah. So
That's
and that's not
interesting.
a yeah, and that's a descriptive statement. So that's not applying a model and trying to infer causation. That's just descriptive. So there could be confounding variables and all that sort of thing. Um, but regardless, it makes it less plausible to say that the church is causing suicides when you see this negative statistical relationship. It's quite strong and quite big. And the
That's
second,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, and the second study was using the same data set.
Uh-huh.
This was by researchers at BYU, and they sort of took a deeper dive into the data, looking not just at descriptive statistics, but also trying to model some of these outcomes. And the results are consistent with the other study. So I mentioned that when you control for demographic variables, these relationships persist. And they've also found that much of the difference was mediated by the fact that Latter-day Saint youth have lower levels of substance abuse. They have lower levels of family conflict at home, better relationships with family, and that explained much of the gap.
Interesting. So basically, because of not only the fact that they are Latter-day Saint, which we've said that the data generally show that if you're religious, your likeliness of suicide goes down, but because of a lack of substance abuse, because of stability in their family relationships, that kind of stuff actually causes it to go down. This seems to fly totally in the face of the narrative that it's mean family members at home rejecting their gay children because the church tells them to hate them. That's why the suicide rate's going on. I mean, this is the exact opposite. The data seems to be saying the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's not what you would expect if you were in the mindset of the narrative that's been popular online since the mid 2010s. And as you say, the narrative has been, that families are rejecting their gay kids and throwing them out into the street, and that these kids are going and committing suicide.
So, and now here's the thing. I think both of us can admit that sort of thing can happen, and indeed there are family members who reject their gay children and things like that. And you and I are of the same opinion, I assume, in saying that's horrible, that's wrong, that's not what we teach, and those people will be held accountable for such abusive and wrong behavior. Can we agree on that? I assume we're on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that isn't to say that there won't ever be a case, but I guess the idea is that would be not because of the church, but in spite of the church, that those sorts of things are happening.
Right. It seems like in this data, at least which is in Utah, so at least among high school and middle school students in Utah, LGBT kids who are Latter-day Saints tend to have better experiences with their families than other kids, and this seems to help explain the lower rates of suicidal thoughts and behaviors.
That's interesting. So there was one other quote from your article I'd like to read. It said, when it came to depression, LGBT youth benefited more from being Latter-day Saints relative to having no religion than straight youth did. In fact, straight Latter-day Saint youth had a higher estimated rate of depression than Catholics and Protestants, once controls were included. The same was not true of gay Latter-day Saints. So what's one to take away from this? What's the implication?
Yeah, so this is just something that stood out to me from the BYU paper. And uh, it's striking because it's not just saying that Latter-day Saint LGBT youth are doing better than non-Latter-day Saint LGBT youth. It's actually saying that when it comes to depression, at least, the church might even be doing more good for gay youth than it is for straight youth, compared to having no religion.